Thank you, Mr. Rauch. And I thank the witness for his testimony. We'll now recognize the members for 5 minutes each for questions. I'm going to begin with myself. Mr. Rauch, in your testimony, you state that the California sea lion population across the Pacific coast has increased from approximately 10,000 animals in the 1950s to roughly 250,000 today. Are pinniped populations in the Pacific Northwest at sustainable levels?
Thank you for the question. Yes, they are. The California sea lion population is around 260,000, which is within their optimal sustainable population, the standard for a healthy population under the MMPA. The eastern stellar sea lion population is at around 78,000, also within their optimal sustainable populations.
So have the 120F removals threatened the sustainability of pinniped populations on the West Coast?
We do not believe so. As I indicated, we've only authorized in the hundreds, and there are tens of thousands of the sea lions and seals around the West Coast.
NOAA's 2022 5-year review for several salmon species along the Columbia River noted an overall increase in pinniped predation of Pacific salmon and steelhead. How has pinniped predation impacted NOAA's efforts to recover the ESA-listed salmon species?
Pinniped predation is clearly a factor that is limiting recovery of the salmon stocks. It is not the only factor. There are many factors, but it is one of them, and we can measure in places like the Columbia River where we have seen improvements in predation. Predation's gone down. We've seen increases in salmon runs, which have improved their extinction outlook. They are in better shape because of the predation efforts that we've taken.
Well, in terms of the numbers of pinnipeds that have been killed pursuant to this program, do you think we could increase that number?
We look at that number based on a scientific assessment of the potential biological removal. The potential biological removal for California sea lions is about 14,000 a year, and we're in the hundreds. For eastern stellar sea lions, it's about 2,000 a year, and we're well below that in terms of what we've authorized to date. The current 120F targeted program in the Columbia caps the removals at 10% of the potential biological removal rate. So you take the potential biological removal and go down to 10% of that, and that is what Congress has authorized to be removed in the Columbia, and that's been a successful program.
Do you think we need to change that number?
The administration has no position on whether we need to change that or not. I do think that number is still well below the potential biological removal.
Okay, so we could increase it above the 10% and we would still retain a sustainable population of pinnipeds in the Pacific Northwest?
I think that is likely, yes.
Okay. Do you have a specific number? The witnesses on our second panel will talk about the relationship that the tribes in the Pacific Northwest have with NOAA in working through these issues. What do you think NOAA could more effectively do to partner with the tribes to control the pinniped populations? Do you have some additional ideas?
We very much value our partnership with the sovereign Pacific Northwest tribes. We have been partnering with them on many issues for decades, as long as the National Marine Fisheries Service has been an entity. They have a long history, even well before European civilization came, of managing their own natural resources well. We try to provide within our authorities support for their efforts and to work closely with them. As indicated on the Columbia, we've taken advantage of the congressional authority given and partnered with them to issue a permit that we believe has been successful within the Columbia. We have not been able to do that in the rest of the Northwest because there's no authority to issue a similar permit at the moment. But we have been working with them on preparing if that were to become an eventuality.
Do you have any particular ideas of how to improve this situation from the standpoint of better protecting the salmon species?
The administration has no particular view on this, but if Congress were interested in more flexibilities, Congress could look to the Columbia River provision that it has already passed and implement that more broadly. We think that has been a successful program on the Columbia.
Okay, wonderful. Well, I appreciate your comments and your insight in that regard, and I think that there's definitely some interest among the members of providing additional resources and additional tools to address this situation. I now will go to Ranking Member Hoyle for her 5 minutes of questioning.
Thank you. And first, Madam Chair, I'd like to ask for unanimous consent that both Representative Emily Randall and Representative Glusenkamp-Perez of Washington have permission to sit in on the dais and participate in today's hearing.
Without objection, so ordered.
And Madam Chair, I ask unanimous consent to enter to the record statements from the Fish and Wildlife Departments of the states of Oregon and Washington.
Without objection, so ordered.
Okay. And first, I want to make it clear. I believe that the California sea lions and pinniped overpopulation problem is severely impacting our salmon population, and I would love to see us have a scientifically based approach to culling that population, as they have no natural predators to control a population that is truly upsetting the balance in our ecological systems and wildlife. So, having said that, I am very concerned that staff and programmatic cuts at NOAA are affecting hatchery operations, tribal coordination, and the ability of scientists to successfully carry out programs like Section 120F. NOAA we have not even reached the 10% allowed culling rate of pinnipeds because, apparently, of staff cuts. Now, I have specifically heard that tribal co-managers and state hatchery operators lost communication access with NOAA staff after a round of layoffs in February. Can you explain how NOAA is working to ensure its responsibilities under Section 120F of part of the MMPA are still being fulfilled?
Thank you for the question. 120F does allow us to issue a permit to the states and the tribes, and they carry out the activities. We coordinate with them. We do fund some of their work, I believe, for the years 2023 going into 2027. We have funded about $1.4 million annually, and that's currently the proposal to support them. I think that their work on that is more than that, but that is the federal contribution through the states on that. So we do continue to work with them, and we continue to outreach to them in support of this program.
So, Mr. Rauch, specifically, I have heard tribal co-managers and state hatchery operators lost communication access with NOAA staff after a round of layoffs in February. Can you explain how NOAA is working to ensure its responsibilities under Section 120F are still being fulfilled, and what, if anything, is being done to ensure, after drastic layoffs, that the people who are doing the work, whether it's contracted or it's done by the agency, how that work is being fulfilled and how communications are happening?
We do have a tribal coordinator in our West Coast Regional Office, and I speak repeatedly with our West Coast Regional Administrator, both of which reach out to the tribes on a constant basis. So if there are communication problems, I encourage the tribes to reach out to one of those people, and we will try to correct that.
So if I follow up with you with these specific examples, can we get some answers and coordination?
We're happy to take that back.
Thank you. So the MMPA requires NOAA to calculate potential biological removal levels to authorize any legal take. Without staff to carry out the research or monitoring, how will NMFS fulfill the statutory requirement?
We constantly work on the annualized stock assessment process. We don't do I shouldn't say annual, we do a stock assessment periodically for various stocks around the coast under the Marine Mammal Protection Act. We continue to do that. We continue to prioritize those stocks as resources allow.
Okay. So, and then finally, the House CJS bill cuts funding for NOAA's Pacific Salmon ESA work by 44%. What activities will NOAA no longer carry out? And are any of these activities part of NOAA's treaty and trust responsibility to our tribes? And you can get back to me if there isn't time.
Thank you. Yes, that would probably be best. We will get back to you on that.
And I'd like to know specifically what activities will not be carried out. And again, thank you for your work and for being here today.
Thank you for the question. We'll get back to you.
The chair now recognizes Ms. Malloy for her 5 minutes of questioning.
Thank you, Madam Chairwoman. Mr. Rauch, thank you for being here. I am a congresswoman from Utah, and just in case you've never looked at a map of the United States, Utah is a long way from the ocean, and it's a really dry state. I'm fairly confident we don't have any pinnipeds in Utah, and I just learned the term salmonids preparing for this hearing. So a lot of this is new to me and not necessarily an issue that we deal with in my state. And I don't even like to eat fish, so I'm here as a disinterested party, but I do understand that regulations have a way of taking on a life of their own, and they tend to live forever, and sometimes we lose track of what the purpose was of the regulation, and we keep regulating for the sake of the regulation. So my first question for you is, from your position, what would you like to see Congress doing legislatively to allow efficient management of pinnipeds and salmonids so that we can recover the fish species we need and have healthy populations and work efficiently between the federal government, the state, and the tribes?
Thank you for the question. The administration has taken no position on whether Congress should amend this statute or not. But in prior testimony, prior positions, we have indicated that the current structure outside of the Columbia River Basin, the 120 program, which is the broader program, is cumbersome and difficult to work with, and it does not allow the tribes to apply for a permit on their own. It requires you to individually identify the bad acting sea lions. So they have to mark the sea lions, and basically the sea lions have to return before they can be removed, which is a cumbersome process. That does not, Congress has exempted the Columbia River from that process. There also needs to be a finding that the individual sea lions are in and of themselves causing a population level impact, which is a difficult burden to meet. So the program on the Columbia, which does not have those three elements, has been more effective. The tribes have been able to participate. We've been able to, with the tribes and the states, been able to remove sea lions and seen some positive benefits to the salmon, which has not been the case elsewhere.
Thank you. You actually already answered my second and third questions, which were, was it necessary to make sure that a specific individual sea lion is predating on salmon? It seems like we've already pretty firmly established that sea lions like to eat salmonids. Feels like we could make them guilty by association, and whether extending that authority would be helpful. And you answered both of them, so I will return my last 2 minutes, Madam Chairman.
Thank you. The chair now recognizes Ms. Glusenkamp-Perez for 5 minutes of questioning. Thank you for joining us today.
Thank you so much. Thank you to the chairwoman and the ranking member for holding this important hearing and for granting me the opportunity to speak on this issue. So I live right above the Columbia River in southwest Washington, just above the Bonneville Dam, and I have seen and heard firsthand how much work goes into managing sea lion populations and preserving local fisheries and tributaries. As the name implies, sea lions are a species that belong in the sea, not in our rivers. A sea lion is not a small creature. For scale, please note the Toyota Corolla. A stellar sea lion is 11 feet long and 2,500 pounds. These are behemoths, and Toyota Corolla 15 feet and 3,000 pounds. And when Congress amended the Marine Mammal Protection Act to expand lethal removal authorities, it provided that eligible managers along the Columbia River could remove up to 450 California sea lions and 176 stellar sea lions during the 5-year life of the take permit. Yet we have only seen our managers come close to these max. We haven't even seen them come close to reaching these levels. In 2024, only 27 California and 21 stellar sea lions were removed at Bonneville Dam. As of July this year, only 26 and 11 have been removed. Ask yourself, why are these numbers so small? The arduous process of removal is a key feature. I'm concerned that the factors contributing to this severe utilization, namely the cost and the onerous back and forth of trapping the creature, identifying its threat, shaking a can of pennies at it, retrapping, and then finally darting, contribute heavily. We've done some back-of-the-envelope math to try and determine the cost to remove sea lions under the permit. From our estimates, it costs over $38,000 per removal from the Columbia River. That's roughly $203 per salmon saved in state and taxpayer federal dollars. I was successful in including language in the FY26 Commerce, Justice, and Science Appropriations report that passed out of committee that would direct your agency to conduct a study on the most effective strategies for pinniped removal, considering factors such as animal health and cost. So my question to you, Mr. Rauch, could you tell me more about what NOAA is actively doing to ensure that current pinniped removal strategies are the most effective, and if direct kill strategies are being considered?
Thank you for the question. Yeah, the current permits, as you indicate, do authorize direct mortality removals, and we do think that in the Pacific Northwest for these species, that is the most effective way. We have tried over the years to employ non-lethal removals. We have moved them hundreds of miles away, and they do come back.
Faster than the people taking them out.
Perhaps. They do come back. They are remarkably resilient, and they do know where their food source is. It is very difficult to encourage them to leave with anything less than force. At one point, we did try to find space in zoos and aquariums, but that rapidly filled up. So there is no, in our opinion, currently a better way to address predation other than lethal removal.
Yeah. Thank you for that insight. Has NOAA looked into the potential challenges to removal efficacy posed by current permit requirements, such as the requirement for the sea lion to be individually identified and observed eating fish before they can be removed?
I think we have said in prior testimony, and I indicated earlier today, that is a very cumbersome provision that does not exist currently on the Columbia River, and it makes the Columbia River, because they don't have to do that, that is a more effective program.
And yet, I think we're seeing that we're still not able to exercise those permits. And I would say to my fellow committee members, this is local lore. This is one of the things I hear about all the time. I don't have air conditioning in my elementary schools, and to see the cost and expense gone through and the levels of ologists we have to go through to protect our reliance on salmon. It's well known, and in living memory, there are people in my family who lived because their daddies were good fishermen, and we're very concerned at the lack of efficacy of the current removal process. So thank you for your work on this.
Thank you. Well, I sure hope we can figure out a way to fix it. And I now, the chair now recognizes Mr. Westerman for 5 minutes of questioning.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you, Mr. Rauch, for your testimony. And also, paying attention to the questions you've already answered. And I think, and correct me if I'm wrong, you said that we could remove 14,000 sea lions per year and still have a sustainable population, or did I misunderstand that?
Thank you for your question. Yes, the Marine Mammal Protection Act requires us to assess the optimal sustainable population and the potential biological removal, which is how many sea lions or whatever that species is you can remove and still have that sustainable population.
And that number is 14,000.
For California sea lions, it is 14,000. For the stellar sea lions, it is 2,000. Okay,
but the law limits that to 10% of that number, so that would be 1,400 or 1,600 if you were to add them all together.
I'm not great at math, but yes, the current 120F does limit what we can authorize to 10% of that potential biological removal rate.
So if I'm reading the data correctly, over the past 5 years, we've removed like 229.
We have not come close to that level.
And that's a very conservative number when you look at 10% being the limit. But also, I believe your testimony notes that the current 120F removals have saved more than 110,000 adult fish. So the potential to save more fish is in the millions while maintaining a sustainable level of sea lions. Is that correct?
There is a potential. there are only so many sea lions you can remove that are actually causing the predation. I think one of the testimonies was the predation went down to 1%. So at some point you run out of sea lions. There, not coastwide. There's plenty of sea lions, but you would run out of sea lions that are preying on the fish at the locks. But there is a potential, the more that you remove, we do see improvements in survival.
I know you had mentioned that the goal of balancing the requirements between ESA and MMPA would require more regulatory flexibility.
If at the moment we cannot implement a similar program to the program on the Columbia elsewhere in the region, because 120, which is the authority Congress has given us elsewhere, does require us to have individually identifiable sea lions. We've got to determine that those sea lions themselves are having a negative impact on the population, and we cannot partner with the tribes directly in order to take advantage of their historical ability to manage the populations.
So in NOAA's view, would expanded authority for lethal management of pinnipeds coast-wide likely have a positive impact on salmon recovery and abundance?
If Congress were to choose to do that, I do think that would improve salmon recovery and abundance coastwide.
So what data gaps exist today in the Columbia River to guide fishery managers and policymakers to identify the best strategies for pinniped management throughout the whole region?
It is very difficult. There are numbers of different salmon stocks. So the Columbia River stocks are not the same as the Puget Sound stocks. So you need to understand the local impacts on those stocks. And the pinniped populations are also not uniformly measured. There are a lot of them, but to identify whether or not the removals in one particular river, like somebody said, the Nisqually, whether that would be having a population level effect on the whole sea lion population is something we are not currently resourced to assess. So those kind of levels, because the requirement is that you have to tie individual sea lions to population effects, that requires a degree of scientific research that we've not been able to provide.
And what's the limitation on being able to provide that research?
We have not had the funding, and given that there is not an authorized partner to manage at that local level, there's not the resources to do that.
So in my travels in the Pacific Northwest, every time I go out and I visit with people about salmon, I'm nearly always talking with tribes who seem to have a really good grasp of what needs to happen. They're doing great work in that area. Is there a way for NOAA and tribes to partner better on these issues?
We do. We would agree with your assessment of the important works that tribes do now and have historically done throughout time immemorial on these stocks. There are always better opportunities to partner. We try to partner with them to the extent that we can. We cannot partner with them directly on sea lion removal outside of the Columbia because we don't have that authority currently to do that.
Thank you. Good exchange of information there. The chair now recognizes Mr. Neguse for 5 minutes of questioning.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I appreciate the opportunity. Certainly an interesting and important topic, and am grateful for the committee chairwoman and ranking member's decision to hold this hearing. Mr. Rauch, I wanted to ask you some questions on perhaps a different topic, but nonetheless very important to my district in Colorado, and I think to the future of our country. Just want to baseline, kind of understand your background. Of course, congratulations on your position now. My understanding is that prior to your current role, that you previously worked at the Department of Justice?
That was some years ago.
Yes, sir.
In the 90s.
Correct, as a trial attorney, and I believe at some point as an assistant section chief at the Department of Justice, and you've received many accolades, I think both within DOJ and the Department of Commerce. Given that experience, I suspect you are more familiar than most with the organic statutes that create and authorize different programs that are implemented at NOAA. Fair to say?
I am familiar with the fisheries statutes, the Magnuson-Stevens Fishery Conservation Management Act, the MMPA that we've talked about here, the Endangered Species Act. There are other statutes that affect other parts of NOAA that I do not have familiarity with.
Sure. Well, let's stick with fisheries, just by way of example, because I think you've attested that that's where your expertise is centered. I presume you'd agree with me that your department, your division, would be unable to reorganize wide swaths of the fisheries programs that you implement, provided those have been created, authorized by federal statute. You would not, NOAA wouldn't be able to proceed with, for example, eliminating whole cloth those programs. Is that a fair assessment?
That sounds to me like you're asking a question well beyond my capability to answer. I am no longer an attorney for the United States government, and I do not know the full breadth and scope of what authorities might be available to do that.
Okay, fair enough. The reason why I asked that question, you are a senior high-ranking official at NOAA. We rarely get opportunities to question and have dialogue with folks at the Department of Commerce these days. As you know, there's certainly been public reporting, we don't have much visibility into the details, that there are massive reorganization plans that the Department of Commerce has proposed specifically for NOAA. And those reorganization plans, at least based on public reporting that we've seen, suggest that several core programs administered by NOAA could be eliminated entirely, which would be plainly violative of federal law. And we've seen that play out, that episode, over the course of the last several months in other departments, most prominently the Department of Health and Human Services, which is mired in litigation on this precise point. I represent multiple NOAA installations in Colorado. I don't know if you've had an opportunity during your long career to visit Boulder and to visit the facility there. Perhaps you have.
About 20 years ago, sir.
20 years ago, yes, sir. So, well, we welcome you back. These are your compatriots, hardworking federal civil servants doing important work that has been statutorily authorized and funded by the United States Congress. And so I guess I would offer, insofar as you are willing to relay back to your colleagues at headquarters here in Washington or in Maryland, that it matters a great deal that the Department of Commerce follow the law. And I do not believe that the department has the authority to eliminate programs that have been authorized by Congress. The Ocean Acidification Program, the Earth Prediction Innovation Center, otherwise known as EPIC, the National Sea Grant College Program. These are all programs that Congress has authorized by law on a bipartisan basis, and there are hardworking civil servants, your colleagues at NOAA, back in Boulder, in Colorado, and across the country, who are responsible for implementing these programs, as well as the cooperative institutes that have also been authorized by Congress. And I just would encourage you to go back to your colleagues, as I said, at headquarters to make the case that there are certainly many of us in Congress who are watching this very closely and who expect the department to follow the law. So you're welcome to respond to that, but I would just, I'm not trying to, kind of get you into a gotcha question here or anything like that. It's important for me, given the limited exposure that we have to officials at the Department of Commerce these days, to be able to relay that to you.
I'd be happy to relay those views back to them.
Thank you. And thank you, Madam Chair. I yield back the balance of my time.
The chair now recognizes Mr. LaMalfa for 5 minutes of questioning.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you for appearing with us, Mr. Rauch. So we have in California the listed winter run Chinook salmon and the spring run Chinook salmon under the ESA. So that's requiring more cold water to be held in Shasta Dam for future releases to ostensibly help the fish, mostly in the fall. This water otherwise could be used to help towns and farms across the state, as we've seen tremendous water cuts affecting the Sacramento and San Joaquin Valley in recent years. Sometimes maintaining the water can result also in flood releases during the winter and spring, as they have to leave space for flood control. So the water you didn't get to use during the summer in previous crop years, for example, kept the dam too full at the time they have to have their buffer zone for flood control in the year. So that means the water got wasted, not being able to use it because they had to keep the lake deeper. When the water is released from Shasta for the benefit of salmon, it may not always be able to be used by constituents down the line because of the timing I mentioned here, because if you're releasing it in the fall, then that can't go to agriculture. Agriculture's season is pretty much over with by then. So it may not be needed for anything else other than to try and drive the temperature of the river down by 1 degree, and that's going to be the be-all, end-all to help the fish population. 1 degree colder water in the river. Meanwhile, a bigger and bigger zone behind the dam is now unusable water for anybody else. Other regulatory restrictions can prevent this water from being exported from the delta farther down into the Central Valley via the Central Valley Project and the State Water Project conveyance canals. So instead it rushes on out to the delta, through the delta. So what we see, though, is that salmon populations continue to decline despite all this new water over the last 30 years being pushed through there because of predatory fish, because of actually the environmental issues that not get talked about enough of Bay Area cities releasing effluent into the delta, causing algae and lack of oxygenation and all that. So we do happen to have 2 fish hatcheries, the Livingstone National Fish Hatchery and the Coleman National Fish Hatchery, which spawn Chinook salmon to help bolster the populations without having to do more stored water in Shasta that isn't usable for other purposes. So these help augment fish populations, especially during multi-year droughts, which is what these dams were created for, was to survive 5 years of drought. They don't anymore. So that more Shasta water can actually be put to human use, such as growing food, instead of importing more and more crops. Like in my Ag Committee briefing today, more and more is coming from Mexico and other places like that. So both of these hatcheries are in the process of being modernized. So, Mr. Rauch, I'm wondering, do you see that the improvements are critical to supporting the salmon production that would help the population? How will NIMFS and NOAA, et cetera, ensure its permitting decisions for these upgrades are timely, predictable, and aligned with the reclamation's investment schedule? Will permitting hold this up for a needless extra amount of time?
Thank you for the questions. We do think that these 2 hatcheries are important for the long-term health of the populations. We have been working closely with the Department of Interior, who are the operating agencies of these facilities, and we are committed to working with them within their permitting schedule, their processing schedule. Do
they have any urgency on getting these projects done speedily or getting through the permit process quickly or expeditiously?
I cannot speak for the Department of Interior. We are committed to working quickly with them within their schedules.
Okay. All right. So would you support alternate delivery mechanisms such as non-federal partners to help carry out design, environmental work, or portions of the construction to expedite these upgrades and make these a stronger, more viable pair of hatcheries?
I can't speak for Interior, but we have seen many projects across the country where, including non-federal partners, have made the projects more successful.
So you do feel urgency to at least at some level try and speed these up and have it?
We will work within the bounds that try to meet the schedules that Interior has given us, and we will try to do that as quickly as we possibly can.
Okay, thank you. Up on the Klamath River, NOAA and NIMFS are looking at what the Klamath water users are dealing with up there. What they have is studies on fish flows that are over 20 years and very limited to water going only for fish and not agriculture, which has been devastated for the last 20-plus years with that. Is it possible that we could have a consultation that revisits actual best and latest science, not 20-plus-year-old studies on fish needs for all types of fish, and really when it's the coho, that has been the focus?
Yeah, thank you for the question. I know that Interior, once again, is considering reinitiating consultation there. If we do that, we are both statutorily committed to using the best available science, and as you know, the President has indicated we should only be implementing gold standard science. So we would be looking for the best science that we possibly can to apply to any revisited consultation that Reclamation would ask for.
And farmers have urgency to get their 26 crop season planned and 27, et cetera. Can we give them assurance that they know what they can plant, how much water they'll have available in 26 or 27?
Reclamation controls the water delivery, but we are trying to ensure that the National Fisheries Service is not an impediment in terms of scheduling any of that process.
Thank you. I yield back, Madam Chair.
Thank you. I want to thank the witness for your testimony today and for the members and their questioning. The members of the committee may have some additional questions for the witness, and we will ask that you respond to those in writing. So I believe that you're going to be dismissed at this point, and while the clerk is resetting the table, I will introduce our second panel of witnesses. Again, Mr. Rauch, thank you for coming today. Ms. Asia DeCoteau, the Executive Director of the Columbia River Intertribal Fish Commission in Portland, Oregon. Mr. Ed Johnstone, the Chairman of the Northwest Indian Fisheries Commission from Olympia, Washington. And Mr. Larry Phillips, the Pacific Fisheries Policy Director of the American Sport Fishing Association from Olympia, Washington. And the Honorable Ken Choke, the Chairman of the Nisqually Indian Tribe from Olympia, Washington. Let me remind the witnesses that under committee rules, they must limit their oral statements to 5 minutes, but your entire statement will appear in the hearing record. To begin your testimony, please press the button on the microphone, and again, we use timing lights. When you begin, the light will turn green. When you have 1 minute remaining, the light will turn yellow, and at the end of 5 minutes, the light will turn red, and I will ask you to please complete your statement. I will also allow all witnesses to testify before member questioning. I now recognize Ms. DeCoteau for 5 minutes. And have I said your name correctly?
Yes, you did. Thank you.
Oh, good. Thank you. I now recognize you for 5 minutes for your opening statement.